Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going back to the basics, back to the traditional methods of our grandmothers and great-grandmothers. We're talking about rendering beef tallow, one of the oldest and most versatile fats out there. If you're new to tallow, it's simply fat rendered from beef, and it's amazing for cooking, skincare, candle making. Honestly, it's one of those "how did we ever stop using this" kind of ingredients. Tallow offers a savory flavor to food, and it's really easy to make at home. Now, to quickly clarify, olive oil and avocado oil are not seed oils. They come from the flesh of a fruit and they're not pressed from seeds. So I use that a lot on this channel, but I do not use a lot of seed oils in my kitchen. Rendering your own beef tallow at home has so many uses, from seasoning your cast iron to frying your food. You can even make your own skincare and body care, limiting the amount of chemicals that you're putting on your skin and in your body. You can also make candles, which I will be doing in another video to make holiday gifts. And you can make soap, or even just oil your cutting boards after you wash them. There are so many uses to tallow. In today's video, I'll show you how to render it right at home. So we start today's project at a local butcher shop. This one is mine. This is where I buy my ground suet, because supporting local butchers means you probably get better quality and often better prices. Suet is the hard white fat found around the kidneys of cows. It's the purest fat for rendering because it melts clean and smooth. I pay a couple of bucks per pound for my suet, but if you know a farmer, you might get yours for free. So here I have 1 pound of unground suet. That's okay, I'll chop it myself. And here I have 2 pounds of suet with a little bit of meat. The butcher let me know that there was some leftover meat in the grinder. So instead of buying 1 pound of ground, I ended up getting 2 pounds of a little bit of meat and a little bit of ground, which will just leave more cracklings in the bottom. Cracklings are those crispy bits left over after the fat melts, and trust me, they're too good to waste. So now I will chop the suet that I received as a gift from my butcher that did not come ground. Whenever you get suet, ground is best, but if it doesn't come ground, make sure you make it as small as possible. You want as much surface area to be showing on each of the pieces so that this will melt down in heat to a liquid fat. If you have too large of chunks, it will just start to burn or cook a little bit in the fat, and you'll have more cracklings. All right, let's talk about the two methods I'm using today: wet rendering and dry rendering. Wet rendering means adding a bit of water to the pot as you melt down your fat. The water keeps the temperature gentler and prevents burning. As the fat melts, the water evaporates, and you're left with beautifully clean tallow. The result is a lighter color and more of a natural scent, perfect if you plan to use it for skincare or gifts. The downside is that it does take a little bit longer, and you'll need to let it cool completely so the water can separate from the fat before skimming. Dry rendering, on the other hand, uses no water, just pure heat. This method is faster and gives you a deeper, more flavorful tallow that is great for cooking. The only downside, it can brown more easily, so you'll need to stir it often and keep an eye on it. Here I'm using a hand blender to make my pieces even smaller to allow that fat to melt down even more in my wet rendering process. And in my dry rendering, I'm also just blending it down just to get some of those fat pieces out of the meat. But as you remember, I have a lot of meat in this one. That's not normal, but still usable. All right, my first dry rendering is ready for the fridge overnight. I'm going to strain out the meat. That is called the cracklings, and I will be gifting this to my friend who has a dog. If you have a dog at home, dogs love cracklings when you are rendering your own tallow at home. It's also really healthy for dogs because it's pure beef and covered in fat. But of course, talk to your vet first if you're concerned. And as I said before, this is going in the fridge overnight because I'm going to give it one more render tomorrow. And now back to my wet rendering method. This was the pure suet that he gave me. Look at all those beautiful brown cracklings in the bottom. Even though I cut the meat off that I could see while I was chopping it, you're always going to get cracklings when you use the wet method, and that's okay. They also taste really good for animals. Humans can eat them, but I've heard they're not good and I've never tried them. So I add these to the bag for my friend's dog, and yes, I will be my friend's dog's best friend when she gets these cracklings. This will now go to the fridge overnight where the water and fat will separate. I will drain off the water and render this one again as well. Alright, so now it's the next day and you can see these are both very hard from being in the fridge overnight. You will be able to tell the wet and dry rendering because of the crackling pieces. Now I had very little water in this first render, but as you can see, the wet render still has some of the cracklings that sunk to the bottom, and I will scrape that off and render both of these again. For my wet rendering, I'm going to use that for skincare and other facial creams, so I want that to be very clear. I'll render this 3 times, sometimes 4, and for my dry render, I usually just render it twice. Now friends, you could do this whole project in one day, but because I work, I usually will render it once in the evening and then wait for the next day and render it again. I'm in no rush, but this can be done very quickly. You just have to be around the kitchen, near the kitchen. You don't have to be watching it all of the time. I do add salt because that does help purify the wet render, because the color will get lighter and lighter the more I render it. For my dry render, I'm just melting it again one more time so that I can strain it one more time, and then it will be ready to go. Once your fat is fully melted, it's time to strain it. I pour mine through a fine mesh strainer. You can also use a cheesecloth or both. Now to be concise with my steps, let me just tell it to you straight. Once I've melted it, I strain it. I pour it into the bowl and refrigerate it. The water sinks to the bottom, the fat solidifies on top, and the next day, I flip it, scrape it, and melt it again. See? Look how beautiful that is. Now, while I don't eat beef cracklings, it is very common to eat the lard cracklings. Lard comes from pig. They're crunchy, salty, and they can be downright addictive. You can sprinkle them on salads, put them in mashed potatoes or soup, or you could just eat them straight out of the bowl. But when it comes to beef, I've heard the flavor is not that great. Alright, now while you watch me repeat these very easy steps, let's talk about how I'm going to use these for gift giving. For the tallow I use for skincare, as I said, I render it 3 or 4 times to make sure it is extra pure. After that, I will let it cool, and then I'll whip it in my mixer, add a few drops of essential oil, a bit of jojoba oil, and a little bit of beeswax for texture. The result is a luxurious, all-natural face and body cream that rivals anything that you can find in a fancy boutique, and it costs me just a couple of bucks per jar, and that includes the cost of the jar. I get my jars in bulk or at the dollar store. I add pretty little labels, and then I wrap them up for friends and coworkers. Paired with a homemade tallow candle, it's a thoughtful, unique gift that most people genuinely love, and it all cost me around $5 total for a gift you cannot buy in stores. And remember, tallow is one of the best things you can add for your skin that is all natural, no chemicals, and it keeps those wrinkles away. Of course, you do not have to stop at skincare. You can make candles, fry food, use it in lip balm. If you make your own lip balm, add in a little bit of beeswax. You can polish furniture, you can oil your cutting boards, you can condition your leather purses and shoes. There is so much you can do with tallow. Our grandparents used chicken fat called smolts and pig fat called lard and beef tallow. Nothing ever went to waste, and we can do the same. Rendering is simple, thrifty, and honestly, it's kind of meditative. I will make a video to show you how I make gifts. If you learned something, like this video and subscribe. Thanks for watching.